Good morning. We are live this morning. Today, I'm in conversation with clinical psychologist Dr. Nanika Coor. Good morning, Dr. Coor. Welcome.
Hi there. Happy to be here. Thanks for
Thanks for,
having me.
oh, you're welcome. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to get my little notes here so I don't mess up and tell everybody that Dr. Coor is a Brooklyn, New York based clinical psychologist and respectful parenting therapist and consultant, providing virtual psychotherapy for parents in New York State. She helps cycle breaking parents start hearing a kinder inner voice and experiencing more mutually respectful interactions with their children without feeling like a doormat or a dictator. We're going to be talking about parenting conundrums with Dr. Coor. It's going to be really fun. And we're going to do it from the perspective of let's parents and all adults raising tweens and teens, just give ourselves a break, okay? Let's have a little more self-compassion and a little less self-criticism. Nanika will be answering questions from those joining us live this morning. So please type your questions or comments in the question or comment section here on Facebook Live, and I will find them. I'll be looking for them and we'll put them up. She'll address them. If you're joining us via replay, she will not be here to answer your questions, but you can dialogue with others who are listening or watching during the replay. That often happens, so we welcome that. Good morning, Nanika. Again, thank you for joining us.
Hi. Hey, I'm excited to get to chatting.
We're excited to get you here. We talk about the teens a lot and the children, but we want to talk about parents this time. And we know that you work with parents of children of all ages.
Mm-hmm.
And we like to work with people who are interested in tweens and teens. So let's begin with you telling us a bit about yourself and your work.
Well, as you said, I'm a clinical psychologist and respectful parenting therapist. I have a private practice in Brooklyn, New York, and I see mainly parents. I work with them individually and also in dyads. Usually parents are coming in because they're having some sort of relationship issue with their child. Sometimes they have a child that they sort of have relationship challenges with or a behavior challenge. They're having a hard time with the developmental stage their child is going through. I get a lot of people who have tweens who are, this was my child one day and this is my child today. And I'm very confused about this. So I get a lot of that. And it's a lot of talking to parents about what they learned about parenting from their own childhood and being raised themselves and what they're bringing into their parenting, what they want to keep, what they want to leave behind.
Okay. So kind of like we have a parenting DNA code, so to speak.
Sort of. Yeah, it gets in there.
Yeah. Okay, so why don't you share some common parenting conundrums that you work with on families and how we can work our way through them?
Well, one actually, which is older teen, a teen conundrum that I've seen a lot is the applying to college sort of age. I recently just had two different parents I'm speaking with about that same stage and how much do parents push their children to go somewhere they want them to go? How much do they allow the child to choose? How much do the parents themselves hear other voices from other parents saying, this is where your child should go? And so there's a lot of how much do I allow my child to be themselves and how much do I sort of push them to be what I think that they could be? And that's really hard. And I'm a person who is I advocate a lot for collaborating with children and talking with them. And they're the ones who have to go to that college and live on that campus and have that experience, not you. And so I think that a kid should get a pretty big say in what's going to happen to them in the next 4 years of their life.
That's a hard one for parents because we know we want to step back, but also we've invested so much to get to this point.
Indeed. And I think it's important to be able to talk to your child about what are your concerns or your misgivings about where they've chosen. You can put everything out on the table, right? And instead of, a lot of the parenting conundrums that I deal with from, people who have toddlers all the way through teen years is just that idea of, getting kids to do something, the idea I can get them to do something, this idea of controlling them, coercing them, bribing them, pushing them, this idea of like trying to secretly get them to do what I want. It's like, it's not a secret. They know. They know you're trying to do that. But the idea is just, you can be so much more open and honest with your children. Like, here are my concerns. Here's what I want for you, from you. Can we have a conversation about it? Keeping those lines of communication open is really what's important. Keeping that relationship where your children know that they can always come and talk to you no matter what it is. Just like we were talking about before, about making mistakes and teenagers who make mistakes. The parents I have who work with, the parents I have who have tweens or younger kids, 8s and 9s and 10s, talking about really shoring up the relationship at that time, because eventually they will be teens and you want them to not be afraid to come to you, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why one of the reasons that I advocate for non-punitive parenting. So the kind of parenting that I encourage people to do does not have consequences and punishments, and it has conversations. And here's why that doesn't work. And here's what, like, let's talk about what you can do next time that is healthier or better or, somehow safer. And just really, instead of sort of lording control over children, really having, instead of power over them, power with them, we can do this together.
Oh, I like that, power with them. So I'm a parent and I'm really interested in shifting from power over to power with, but I have a background. I come with baggage. I was raised a certain way, and I'm using this in case my mom is watching. I am using this hypothetically.
Hypothetically, I don't know where this could be coming from.
How do I make the shift? How do I shift from power over to power with? I'm very interested in this, but especially in any kind of tense situation, you're going to slip back into old habits.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's two things. It's making a commitment yourself that that's what you're going to do moving forward, right? And committing to that is half the battle, right? Just saying that's what I'm going to do. I have a lot of parents who come in and say, Dr. Coor, I went home and I did what you said 2 times and it didn't work. Therefore, this doesn't work. Like it's making a habit, changing a culture in your house, really. And that takes time. And children will not necessarily understand this shift. So I always recommend sitting down with them and just saying, I've had a change of heart and I've been thinking that maybe this isn't the best way to go and I want to go a different way. And this is the way this is what to expect from me going forward, right? Mm-hmm. Like, this is what I will generally be doing going forward. And of course, in moments that are tense and there's conflict between you, no matter how old your child is, the first thing to do is just calm your body down, really taking a deep breath and trying not to speak from that place of being really activated. That's not going to get you anywhere good. And also, there's got to be one stable person, one stable nervous system in the room, right? If your child is really agitated and really getting upset, and there needs to be somebody in that room who can take a deep breath and be like the anchor for the upset person, the upset child. Look at me. I'm here, sort of a lighthouse in the storm. I'm here. I'm calm. I got you. We can figure this out together. That kind of attitude. Mm-hmm. And when you do slip up and when you do yell, because of course you're going to, or say something that you regret or do something that you regret, being able to repair right away, as soon as you are calm, as soon as your child is calm, when there's a connected moment, coming back together and saying, I didn't like the way I behaved. That's not what I wanted. And this is what I want to do. And this is my plan. And not holding on to that and beating yourself up about it. You're not going to make yourself do any better by making yourself feel worse. So, just the idea of having that self-compassion and being able to say to yourself, okay, I slipped up there, and just getting right back on the horse. You know what I mean? Like, I slipped up and I'm going to start again. Just keep starting again. That's it. I mean, that's what we are all doing all the time. You just start again, right? Like, the parenting just keeps going, right? And you're always going to have another opportunity to do better, always.
So keep starting again and again. We have a question I want to remind everybody who's watching us live, please put your questions and comments in the comment section and we will address them. Right now, we have a question from Heather. And Heather says, so no consequences, just conversations? I'm with you, Heather. I was thinking that. I was like, that's a hard one.
Right. Well, so tell me, I mean, I want to know from you, right? Like, what do you think the consequence does? Like, what's your goal, right? If your goal is for your child to make a different choice the next time, then you can talk about that. What choice will they make? What is, like, you can problem solve something before it happens, right? So this is what you did in this situation and that did not work. We see that did not work. Like, what are we going to do the next time? Let's talk about it. What are all your options, right? The idea is when a child knows that there's going to be consequences that are going to be negative to them, it becomes more about avoiding the consequences than it does learning what to do that's the right thing. And we want them to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, not because they're going to get in trouble if they don't, right? We want it to be coming from inside of them. I do the right thing because it's the right thing, right? I don't do the right thing because my mom is going to yell at me or my mom is going to punish me. And because if mom is not there to punish me, I'm going to do what I want. Like, then the idea is you want them to internalize what's right, right? And consequences and punishment become for the child about avoiding that punishment. And it's not so much about learning any lesson. Like when you send a child to their room, like, you know, go to your room and think about what you've done. They're not thinking about what they've done. They're thinking about revenge on you and how angry they are. Like there's none of that, right? So the idea, Alfie Kohn, who is an author who is amazing, who wrote Unconditional Parenting, which, Heather, I suggest that book to you. But one of the things he talks about is that, you know, in our society, which is like more authoritarian in some ways, you know, the idea is if someone makes a mistake, you know, if you make a mistake, then you have to suffer. And that really, really sets up this idea that, first of all, it sets up perfectionism, like mistakes are bad, mistakes are wrong, can never make mistakes, you know, can't be fallible, which is impossible, right? And then there's also this idea that, you know, having slipped up or made some developmentally appropriate mistake means that like all is lost. And now I'm losing something. I need to feel bad. I need to feel shame. I need to feel guilt, right? You don't necessarily need those things, you know? And when a child isn't afraid at 7 years old to come and tell you, like, I broke the lamp, and they know that you're not going to scream at them, hit them, send them to their room, all the things, right? Then they will bring those things to you. They'll be more likely to say, you know what, I went to this party and people were drinking there and I felt really uncomfortable. They're more likely to get to that place if they don't feel like they have to hide things from you because they're afraid of getting in trouble. And you want those lines of communication open so that you can keep them safe when they're teenagers, right? And if they're hiding things from you, you can't help them with something they're not telling you about. And so it's really important to keep those lines of communication open. And that means not being the person that they fear.
That's very important. You don't want to be you don't want to be the person that they fear. You want to be the person, the resource, the person they respect, definitely respect.
Absolutely respect. But the way that they respect you is because you taught them how to do it by respecting them. That's what it really looks like. And, you know, and it's not to say that there's no logical consequence, right? Like if, you know, your baseball breaks the window, perhaps you are helping pay for that window, right? Because maybe you shouldn't have been throwing the ball inside, but it's not intended to make you suffer. It's intended to repair what happened, right? How do we make amends? How do we repair what has happened? That is certainly something you work with your child about, right? It's not like you smacked me in the face and we're just going to go on with our life, right? We're going to talk about why hitting is wrong and why that's not a way to express your anger, right? Like but it's not about you go to your room for an hour. Like, what is that going to do? How is that going to teach you anything about hitting, right? If you're, you know, an 8-year-old or something like that, you know, that's not going to teach you anything about that.
I love that. We have a couple of questions we're going to get to, but I love what you said. It's not about suffering. It's about repair. So yes, there's a consequence, but we have to think through what is our intention with the consequence.
Yeah. What do you want them to learn? Because discipline is about learning, you know, it's about learning something.
So we have a question here, and I apologize in advance if I mispronounce your name, Ferdoz. I'm sorry if I mispronounced it. She says, how to handle a teenager that repeatedly lies. So how should we do that? How can we do that?
That's really, really hard. And I'd be wondering, I don't know how old this child is, but I'd be wondering about the relationship, right? So for me, when someone is lying, what are they trying to avoid by lying? Are they trying to avoid some kind of punishment? Do they have something going on with them? Like there's anxiety about something. And if I tell you the truth, like something else is going to occur that's bad. There could be any number of reasons why a teenager is lying, and we need to go to them and ask them. It's funny, you mentioned Ross Greene, but I will mention him again right now. But Ross Greene and Plan B, the kind of collaborative problem solving that you do with children, that is what I would suggest. I would suggest having conversations with that teenager. I would suggest trying to repair the relationship with that teenager, because I would be wondering, if I were the parent, I might be saying, like, what have I done, or what has happened in our relationship that my child doesn't trust me and doesn't trust that they can tell me the truth? What are they fearing will happen if they do? And I would be starting from that place and wondering how I can shore up the relationship so that there's more trust there between us. And certainly therapy. That's therapy for everyone, right? Like, is your child in therapy? I don't know if it's a he or she or non-binary person. If your teenager is repeatedly lying and you're not able to, through conversation, figure out what's going on for the teenager, what's their problem, it's really about listening to them. They have a problem if they're lying. There's some issue that they have. What is it? It's our job to find out what's your problem so I can help you with that. And the book Raising Human Beings is a wonderful book, and it will teach you how to have these conversations.
Okay. Thank you for that. I hope that helps. We have Heather says, okay, so what if the behavior is repetitive and they know their behavior isn't the right thing? That's a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'd be wondering, what is keeping the behavior going? And there's so many things I could ask, but one of the things that comes up is you want to look for patterns, right? When does this behavior happen? Does it happen only at certain times of day, certain times of the month, around a certain type of thing that happens in your life? Is there something going on in your life that is, in the family's life, that is transitional? Is there some major stressor in the family? I'd be looking at all of these different things, because when a child is doing something over and over again that they know is not the right thing, there's two things that I'm thinking, right? I'm thinking, what are the limits and boundaries that are around this behavior to begin with? Are they developmentally appropriate? Is this something, because sometimes we set limits for kids that they are not able to achieve, if that makes sense. Sometimes we expect of 8-year-olds what 12-year-olds can do. And so they are repeatedly doing the wrong thing, but that's because the thing you're asking of them isn't developmentally appropriate. So it's sort of like, is your limit developmentally appropriate? Is it realistic? Is it something that really is sustainable over time? So all of those things are something that I would sit down with this child about and say, well, what is the rule? And like, why is it so hard? What is your expectation, parent? My expectation is that you will do X, Y, Z. Why is it so hard for you to do X, Y, Z? Let's talk about that. What is keeping you from doing that? What's getting in the way of you doing X, Y, Z? And I would be having many, many conversations until I get to what that thing is. And then we fix that problem together, the teenager and I.
Okay. And two things that you said: are our expectations realistic? Because sometimes we're off the mark. And also the patterns. I don't know if everybody caught that, but sometimes there are patterns, and the patterns can indicate another problem or issue that needs to be addressed. You mentioned, in response to the question before this, Ross Greene. I want everybody to know Dr. Ross Greene is going to be on Tuesdays with Kamyra in a couple of weeks. I don't have the date memorized, but so that's another good conversation.
Everyone go. He's amazing. It's life-changing.
So yay. We're all in sync there.
I mean, it's really just helpful, being collaborative, right? It's just all really about working together with your child instead of like being adversaries.
If you have any more questions or comments, please post them and we'll address them. Okay, so let's say we'll use one of your examples. We really tried, and we lost it. We being the adult in the situation. And now I feel horrible about it. I lost it. I'm no good at this. What can I do to change my inner dialogue? I may have already apologized to my family members, but I'm still feeling horrible. I'm such a horrible person. I had to apologize again. What can I do about that?
Well, first of all, self-compassion. So Kristen Neff is a researcher who has done a lot of research in self-compassion, and she breaks down self-compassion into 3 components: mindfulness, self-kindness, and common humanity. And mindfulness is, being in the present moment, right? So staying out of that like future place where I'm worried about things that are going to happen in the future, really worried about what I just did, things that happened in the past, right? Feeling really depressed about that. It's coming into this moment. Can I feel like my clothes on my body? Can I feel like my glasses touching my face? Like I'm in this moment, being mindful. And then also understanding the common humanity, that these kinds of things happen to everyone. There's not a human being alive who's ever been a parent who has never done anything regrettable. Come on, right? Like we've all done something regrettable. That happens to everyone. So just knowing that you're not the only one, right? That's the common humanity piece. And then the self-kindness. Can you say something kind to yourself, right? Can you understand why? Can you validate your own feelings, right? So whatever led you to do the yelling or losing it, as you're saying, with the kid, right? Whatever led you to do that, something happened. There was a cause to that. That didn't just come out of nowhere. That happened because potentially you were stressed out. Potentially a boundary of yours was crossed. Potentially something terrible happened this morning and you're still dealing with that. The idea is to give yourself some grace, right? You got to that point because of something. How can you take care of yourself? How can you see yourself as a struggling person rather than a misbehaving person, which is exactly the same way as we want to look at our child, right? So instead of looking at a lying child as a child who is misbehaving, we look at a child, we see this child as struggling. We see this child not giving us a hard time, but having a hard time. How can I help them, right? So when we think about children giving us a hard time, we think about punishment or, somehow setting all these rules and limits and boundaries. But when we think about a child struggling, that's our mindset moves toward help. And that's what we can do for ourselves too, is help ourselves in that way by giving ourselves grace and thinking positively of ourselves.
Give yourself some grace. You're struggling in the situation. You're not misbehaving. That's a real helpful way to look at it. You spoke earlier about generational parenting habits, methods that may not be working for the current family dynamic. How do we identify those? And then if we want to shift, what are some steps that we can take? I know we're not going to do it all in 3 minutes here today.
Yes.
But if someone is interested in this, where can they go? First, let's identify what it is. And then where can they go if they're interested in doing more work?
So intergenerational trauma is the kind of trauma that's passed down through generations and it can be through the modeling of behavior and just the copying of that. And it also can be genetic in some ways, in that I could have a predisposition. If I have, let's say, a great-great-grandmother who was incredibly anxious, I could 3 generations later have a predisposition for anxiety, right? And so if the things happen in my environment that lead me to be quite anxious, I might then also be a quite anxious person. And that may be in my genes somewhere. But, many different things have to sort of come together for that gene to express itself. When you are trying to identify what you want to change about your own parenting, it's really about being self-reflective. Can you think about, this is really wonderful to do in therapy, but also, or just with someone else, whether it's another parent who you might do this with. There's a book called Parenting from the Inside Out by Dan Siegel. And he has a number of questions in the book that help you reflect upon your own childhood and the way that you were parented. So you can sort of think about those ideas. There's one question that I heard a therapist ask once, that questions like, when you were young and you were feeling scared or sad, whose lap did you crawl onto? Right? So, and your answer to that question is going to tell you a lot about your own childhood, right? And so questions like this that bring up a lot of self-reflection for people. Did I have someone's lap to sit on? Did I have nobody's lap to sit on? Did I definitely have a lap to sit on? Do you know what I mean? Like that, all of those different things are going to tell you, right, about your childhood. And there's a lot of questions there that are like that are helping you reflect upon, what did I learn about relationships growing up? And how much of that am I bringing to this relationship? For instance, one, you talked about yelling, and yelling is one that's usually a big one. If you were a person who was often yelled at when you were young, it's very hard to be a non-punitive parent whose child is yelling at them, because that wouldn't have been allowed when you were young. So it's hard to sort of let that wash over you and let a person's nervous system calm down so that you can have a conversation. But things like this, so deciding what you want to keep and what you want to leave behind once you reflect upon what it was that actually did happen when you were young. A lot of us haven't really thought of that. What was our perception of our childhood?
Interesting. So really think about your perception of your childhood. I agree with you. Whose lap did you crawl in? Really, who did you go to for comfort? Why? And what was it about them that made you feel good? And how can you do that?
Right.
For
how
others?
Can you do that? And if you didn't have it, right? Why not? And what do you want to make sure is present in your child's life if you were missing some things?
We have I know I'm scrolling through our questions. We have some questions, but they're really I'm gonna bring them together instead of getting into specifics. But they're really about your child is defiant. You've had a couple of conversations. They're engaged in a risky behavior, and they don't want to stop. And they've told you that. And there's no indication that the conversations are moving them in the right direction. What should we do?
Well, if they're telling you that they don't want to stop, right? First of all, if you're at this point, I would hope that there is a family therapist involved. That would be my first thing. I would not try to deal with something like this just on my own, right? You are not, if it's gotten to this point, you need some help. Okay. The child probably needs therapy. You're probably stressed out as a parent, probably so do you. But a family therapist that can help you facilitate a conversation, this has gotten beyond you. If there's risky behavior happening, it's gotten, and there's no movement and you don't have control, like the child is too old for you to control, then you need help.
And that's one of the things I think those of us who are raising, especially the older teens, with the tweens, you have a little more influence. With the older teens, if they dig in their heels, whether it's something positive or negative, it's very hard to move them. You don't want to move them if it's positive, but I see on our parent page and stuff, there are a lot of parents who have questions about that, about how to move. And are there resources for those who don't have access for whatever reason to private therapy?
Right. So if you can't go to private therapy, I would be looking at the low arousal technique. I would be looking at low arousal. I would be looking at Ross Green, and I would be following it to the letter, really, because a lot of times parents, as you're saying, what if you can't move them? Like, what if kids are immovable? I'd be thinking, like, why do you want to move them? I'd be thinking, how much does this child feel controlled? And how much does a child feel like they have agency in their life? And so, it would come down to, I think trying not to make unilateral decisions, because children will, especially teenagers, will really resist that. So really trying to be collaborative with them. And when you listen to them and give them a lot of empathy and listen to what they are upset about or what their concerns are, then the floor is open for you to then put your concerns there, right? And they learn a lot of things from that conversation.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And also remember, parents, when we're talking collaborative, you can let your children, teens, tweens know that your family is a team, but the adults in the family are the captains of the team. So that, and they understand that's a good analogy for them. They understand it. So it's not that, you're ceding your wisdom or anything like that.
Not at all. But we want to have influence on our children, right? Rather than control. We want them to take in what we have to, like our values and all of that, voluntarily, right? Because they are interested in us and they like us and they respect us and they totally, think that the things that we have to say are important, and not because we're punishing them and because we're controlling them.
Thank you. We are at the end of our time together. So I have one last thing to ask of you, and that is, if somebody has been listening for the whole 30 minutes or not, what is the one takeaway that they should get from this if they can't remember everything?
Assume positive intent from yourself and from your children. Assume that the intent is positive and that people are doing whatever they're doing to get their needs met. And if you can figure out what if you can figure out what the need is and meet that need, they will no longer have use of that behavior anymore.
Perfect. Wonderful. That is a great place to stop. Thank you, Nanika, for sharing this valuable information. That's it for today, everyone. Please join us tomorrow, same time, same place, 10:30 a.m. for Coffee with Jen and Sharon. They always have a great conversation. They love for you to be interactive with them. And they are moms of teens and tweens, or former teens and tweens. So they have a lot of good stuff to share. Thanks a lot. And I look forward to speaking with you soon. Bye.